it's not enough, I wanna see the stuff the world has got in store. I wanna take it all in, I'm falling. The cityscape by night, wanna catch in my photos. Where you go, every corner twice as bright. They'll be my treasures forever. When I can't hold you tight, I'll see the Stockholm lights. The Stockholm lights, the Stockholm lights. Tomorrow feels a year away, like the seconds, the beginning and the end. But if in time it's yesterday, your picture's gonna bring it home to me again. The world is waiting up, the world is waiting half a step beyond our door. And if it's not enough, I wanna see the stuff the world has got in store. I wanna take it all in, I'm falling. The cityscape by night, wanna catch in my photos. Where you go, every corner twice as bright. They'll be my treasures forever. When I can't hold you tight, I'll see the Stockholm lights. The Stockholm lights, the Stockholm lights.
And I'll declare the leadership group meeting open. Before I go any further, I'll ask Puiraki in terms of a mihi and karakia.
Okay then, why not? Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'll open up the hui with a karakia. Nō reira, mō te timatanga o tēnei hui o te atanei, ino tātou Verisprei. E pai tō mātou nua te rangi, kia tapu i tōingo, e pai whakawhera ana mātou ki a koe. Mō tēnei wā mō tō aroha, tō manaakitanga ki a mātou, kua hui mai i tēnei rā, i rungi te kaupapana. Arahi te mātou e koe i roto e nei mahi, koe hui ka raiti tō mātou kai whakaora, āke tonu āke, āke. Nō reira, e tuake nei i rungi te kaupapa o te rā, e tuatai kei te mihi atu ki a koe i te mana, mō tō kōrero timatanga, nō reira tēnā koe. Tēnā tātou ngā mema o tēnei komite, kua tai mai nei, kua hui mai nei i rungi te kaupapa nei. E kaupapa whakahira, e kaupapa nui o tātou katoa. He mihi ki Mate de Duncan, mō tō taimai, tuatahi, i roto i tēnei komiti i te atanei. Nō reira, i te tuahine, tēnā koe. Nō reira, kia koutou hara mai i roto i tēnei whare, i roto i te rohe o ngā pōtiki. Nō reira, ka mihi ake rā ki a koutou katoa. Ka huri ki te reo Pākehā, just a quick translation, so all that long dissertation says to everybody sitting in this room, welcome, thank you for being here. We have a lot of work to do, so let's just get into it. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ka huri.
Thank you, Puiraki. So, just in terms of a couple of housekeeping matters, the meeting is being live streamed. And the second matter is that in terms of toilets, they're located at the top of both stairwells and beside Suite 4. And in terms of an emergency, the alarm will sound and make our way to the nearest assembly point, which are in either car parks. Okay, in terms of apologies, I think we have a full muster today, so there are no apologies from committee members. What I would like to note though, and the minutes note it, we don't need to resolve on it, is that there is also Minister Twyford has apologised. He would have liked to have been here, either in person or in virtual capacity. Hasn't been able to do that, given his other commitments in Wellington. So I just wanted to note that. But we do have Ernst here as one of his advisors, and I'll be asking Ernst once we get into item 2 on the UFTI work to also make any comments that he would like to outline to the meeting. Are there any, that's it, thank you. Any conflicts of interest in terms of matters on the agenda? If not, we'll move to the confirmation of minutes of our meeting 20 May, and they commence on page 6 of the agenda through to page 9. If I can have someone move and second receipt of those minutes, please. I've got Mayor Tenby, I've got Chair Doug. Are there any matters people wish to raise in terms of any corrections to those minutes? If there are not, I will put that recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So now we'll move to paper A, which is on page 10 of the agenda, related to tangata whenua representation. And I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to Materi Duncan. So Materi is replacement tangata whenua representative and replaces Buddy, who we acknowledged in terms of his contribution and work at our workshop a couple of weeks ago. So really welcome. You can.
Kia ora tātou, ngā mihi atu ki o koutou katoa, ngā mihi ki te tipu. For everybody's benefit, my name is Materi Duncan and I'm the chair of the Te Rangipu o Tauranga Moana with the Tauranga City Council. Now, there was an election process, so Buddy wasn't pushed out and I was replaced. There was an election process and the Rangipu chose me to be on this committee. And I just want to say to everybody, your leadership, you all got leadership in this space today, and I thank you very much for acknowledging my appointment. Kia ora.
Thank you. So there's a recommendation on page 10 in terms of confirming Materi's appointment. Moved by Mayor Gary, seconded by Puiraki. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. So we'll move to paper B, and before I ask Robert and then Ernst to make any comments, I just wanted to make some introductory remarks first. First and foremost, I'd just like to extend a welcome to all those, in addition to members of the committee who are here for this meeting, and then obviously for the individual partner council meetings that will follow. So I just wanted to acknowledge and thank you for coming along to the meetings this afternoon. Because it is a significant milestone in terms of considering the final UFTI report. There's been significant investment by the partners, including NZTA, in the work. So it is significant in terms of being a completed business case. It's to head off to the NZTA board in August, and obviously it's going to the Cabinet later this month. So it is key in terms of propositions for infrastructure investment in the sub-region. and particularly given the funding challenges that all partners, including the government, have. I'd just like to note there is also a peer review process that is underway, and that peer review has been prepared for the NZTA board. And I just wanted to share in terms of a couple of matters related to that, so don't have a hard copy of that, but certainly what's been identified so far is that the AFTI work is good and a sound piece of work, and there's nothing fundamentally wrong or of concern that requires any rework or redoing. There are two matters that are highlighted, and these would equally apply not just to this sub-region but other growth management regions in terms of the any strategies they have. One relates to the financial risk, and this is obviously the overall affordability and sustained effort to keep investing in funding a program over a long period of time. And the second matter relates to delivery, and delivering a program, again, in the long term, and the coordination that's going to be required between the different agencies on an ongoing basis. It is a fairly complex program, many moving parts and a lot of interdependencies. And that's going to require ongoing collaboration and support throughout the partnership. And when I do talk about the partnership, it's both the existing local government partners, tangata whenua, and obviously the government, which are about to formally join the partnership. It actually leads me to page 118 of your agenda, which is the Program and Governance and Management Pyramid. This is quite a significant, in my view, diagram, because it clearly outlines a key role for the partnership, particularly through the Smart Growth Leadership Group, which really is the portfolio management role for the SLG, and which will include monitoring the outcomes and addressing any of the highlighted concerns, and again going back to the funding and delivery matters. Robert will speak in a bit more detail about that in a moment. But I think what the pyramid outlines encapsulates what are the key elements of successful implementation. And that recognising both the individual responsibilities for implementation, but also in the collective arrangements that going forward. And finally, I just wanted to note that there have been several opportunities for partner governance input. There have been individual partner briefings. Robert has attended those. Just got input from a range of people at those, or members at the meetings. There's been presentation to the RLTC. There's been individual engagement opportunities in terms of a number of members of each of the partners, and we obviously had the partnership workshop a couple of weeks ago where there was good input provided, not just by committee members but by other partner governance members and some of the Smart Growth Forum members at that particular workshop. And really we are at the start of a significant movement forward, and with consideration obviously in August by the NZTA board and the government as a partner. I think at the end of the day it will result in changing how we work together, and given that post today the focus on implementation and development of the joint spatial plan that takes a more for wellbeing approach. And at the same time as making sure we don't lose a lot of the good stuff that's in the existing Smart Growth Strategy and other work that the partners both collectively and individually have undertaken. as I've said before, in other meetings and situations, the easy part is the strategy, plan or program development. There will be intense activity and commitment from today in terms of the implementation, and again focusing on the funding and the delivery, and that does require that sustained effort over that long period of time. It's not a 5-day wonder. So with those comments, I'd like to ask Robert to make any comments in terms of the final report. We have a little glitch because he had hoped to be able to put the plans and that on the screen behind me. That hasn't in fact been possible. So he's going to speak to some matters, refer to the references in the agenda, and then once he's done that, I'll ask Ernst to make some comments, and then I'll open it up for comments and questions from the leadership group. Just on that, given this is a formal meeting, the opportunity for questions and comments is restricted to committee members. We did have the workshop 2 weeks ago where it provided the opportunity for others in addition to the committee members to make comments. Robert.
Right, thank you, Bill. Yes, apologies, the fault is all mine in terms of not having the maps on screen to talk to, in terms of organising presentation in advance. So just in terms of update, the document that the committee members have in front of them is the published version of the report. There have been a number of proofreading and editorial changes made from the version that was sent out, but they are all minor grammatical corrections, editing corrections in terms of whether we've used the right kind of hyphen or dash in the text, and amazingly important things like that. So Bill has a list of those if anyone wants to view the list of the changes that we've made from the version that was published with the agendas. In terms of the document, just a reminder, and I know people have reflected to me on the length of the document and the complexity of reading it. This is a document that serves 3 purposes, which makes it very hard to turn it into a crisp story. So it's a program business case to enable the government to consider whether it's prepared to express a willingness to invest in the projects that are in the business case. It is an investment story, again, targeting the Treasury analyst and the NZTA analyst who will be advising the government on those kind of decisions. And lastly, it provides the core of what will turn into the joint spatial plan. So the core elements of a spatial plan in terms of a settlement pattern and your key transport corridors. So that's all I'll say in terms of the document and its complexity at the moment. With the published version, I really wanted to highlight some fantastic work that's been done for us by the He Manukura team, which helps with the messaging. So if I reflect back to the December SmartGrowth meeting, I think one of the councillors from the floor referred to the treatment of tangata whenua in that interim report as anemic, and the role of the partnership not being positively reflected. So we've been doing a lot of work, as the members, committee members and councillors in the room will know, through He Manukura to try to bring the tangata whenua story of urban form and transport through into the document. But we've also done some work in terms of the publishing and the look and feel of the document. And you'll see in the document there's a lot more imagery of raranga, of weaving themes, which I'm going to ask Irene to talk through in a bit more detail in terms of the story that it tells about weaving our different perspectives together into one story for the sub-region. I'm going to pass to Irene, who's the architect of all this wonderful stuff.
Sorry, I don't mind. Thank you, Robert, and thank you to the update team. Great work in the report. The contribution of the design from the He Manukura through our tangata whenua is the work of tangata whenua. We are merely the vehicle that was used for tangata whenua to be a part of this. Firstly, the whakatauki that we use, the proverb, raranga here te taura whiri tangata, ko ai te marawa. Weaving people together to make a positive change was about acknowledging all the strands and the different levels of people being involved in this project. The design that we've used in weaving raranga here is about not only the weaver itself, but also the harakeke or the flax that is strong and durable from the time it's grown and the concept of growing the harakeke, but also from the time that you cut that blade, there is a long process that goes through that. And this was acknowledging the work of everyone. What we've also done as well as the design is actually in the design itself, the meaning behind those designs, but also the colours. The colours also have meaning behind that as well. And just to acknowledge Māoridom, and I'm going to take a quick flash at this, is that within our culture in itself, in our designs, holds the real true meaning about who we are as tangata whenua. I want to also acknowledge the design team, he Manakura, is that they're tangata whenua. So the design of these beautiful tohu that you have in front of you is a young man called Quentin Burrell from Ngāti Ranginui. Also the artwork of the pictures that you see, which we call whakaahua, are pictures of artwork and products that have been developed by tangata whenua here in this rohe. So what you see in here, not only that we've contributed to that, but we're also bringing tangata whenua inclusive as part of Āwhiti. I must admit I had some hesitation to actually contribute Te Reo Māori in design to the Āwhiti, but through the relationship that we've had with the Āwhiti team and Robert, in the conclusion of He Manakura and tangata whenua, it was only right that we come to help and support and bring this report along. What we've also done as well is not just chosen pictures or whakaahua, we've also chosen those pictures to depict what is happening in these sections. So the first one that you see is the whāriki. And the whāriki is a mat, but we've used this as the foundation to actually begin the journey. And that was about bringing all the stakeholders and those partners together. What you also see is the coloured rau, the leaf of the harakeke. The first one you see is the black rau, and that actually is coming from the dark into the light. So from the beginning, now we come into the light, bringing all the key partners together. So in the sections that we've done, we've also used the reo, the language, as simplistic as we can to help understand, to help non-speaking Māori and also Pākehā to understand our kupu and that meaning behind it. So the design team, we took a while to ponder how we do this, but also to acknowledge the work, but also to honour the work and the knowledge of Māori. So through the design, you'll see that we've actually put a small whakamārama and an explanation to each of those. So you will understand the depth that we actually had to think about what this was to actually acknowledge everybody within the Western Bay and our communities, but also that in the weaving, and which is the kairaranga, the person who weaving, which is the Āwhiti team, is that it has to do with the tension of the weave that supports the product that's coming through. So it's an acknowledgement, Robert, to you and your team and the partners about how well we weave. The concept looks really beautiful on page, but actually there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. And this is what we try to reflect in the design, in the reo that's given. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
So I commend to you when you look through the document and you get to the cover pages, you get the explanation and text with it for each of the chapter headings. And it tells a very good story, because if I acknowledge the work of all of the councillors here and the partners, there's been a definite weaving together of different perspectives and views all the way along the journey of UFTI that gets us to a place where, hopefully at the end of today, we have an aligned investment story that we can be telling to government and working with the government to achieve over the next 30 to 50 to 100 years. The other piece that Bill asked me to refer to specifically in terms of handover, and the only other bit of talking I'll do, is to the governance structure, which, Bill, can you remind me which page of the full agenda it's on?
118 from memory.
So it's on page 118 of the agenda, or page 92 of the document, for those of you who have the document. So this, one of the requirements of a business case is what's called the management case, which sets out how are you going to monitor and deliver this business case, and who's accountable for keeping track of its delivery and for changing the strategy as circumstances change and evolve. Because, of course, any strategy is out of date the day after you print it, in a lot of senses. So what we have proposed in terms of a governance structure is one that weaves together all of the existing governing entities that you have in the sub-region, but particularly identifies for the Smart Growth Leadership Group the mahi of looking after the portfolio, of tending the whole program and of adjusting it over time as circumstances change, or as government priorities or council priorities change. So its role is what I would call portfolio management, and by that I mean, and this is what Bill asked me to explore a bit more, is that not tracking how is each individual project being delivered. That is the job of the individual local authorities or government agencies responsible for delivery, but tracking whether the program is as a whole being delivered and whether there are further interventions that need to be adjusted, or further interventions that need to be made to adjust the approach or adjust delivery, and tracking against the outcomes. So there are a lot of big assumptions made in UFTI that over time you will need to test and evaluate whether they were the right assumptions, and you will need to make changes along the way. And it's the role of Smart Growth to keep an eye on how the data and information around your outcomes is tracking against those assumptions, and make the tweaks or nudges in the overarching strategy as you need to. So what we propose in the document is a key task for Smart Growth is to develop a reporting framework around a 12-monthly reporting cycle. Some of that will be tracking the delivery of individual key moves, key projects. I would suggest that's probably a 6-monthly tracking. How are you going against delivery of those commitments? And then there's more the annual reporting, which is around, are there any changes in the operating environment and the achievement of outcomes and the indicators that would cause us to revisit elements of the strategy. So key roles for Smart Growth, and key roles, and the real advantage of the new Smart Growth structure is that you have the government alongside you doing that monitoring and tracking, which will give a lot of confidence to all of the investors that there is somebody who's looking after the program, looking after the strategy, keeping it up to date, and keeping the investment conversation alive. On the peer review, I just want to say a few words about the peer reviewer, just so you don't get left with the impression it's somebody that we found under a bush. The peer reviewer is a gentleman, Dave Brash, who's a very senior official in Wellington, ex-official in Wellington. The kinds of roles that he's held have been Tier 2 at the New Zealand Transport Agency, senior official in Treasury, involved in setting up the Climate Change Office, Tier 2 in the Ministry for the Environment, Most recently, he was the Chief Controller for the response to Kaikoura and to Edgecombe. So he's one of the go-to people in Wellington in terms of senior officials that are brought in for special projects. So we deliberately selected him for his whakapapa into Wellington and the respect that the public sector holds him in. So his words and his peer review give me a lot of confidence that we actually have hit the mark in terms of what the government will be looking for, what NZTA as the investor will be looking at. His review will be published. He's assured us that it's being drafted with a governance audience in mind. So we should get that in the next week or two, and we will publish that on the SmartGrowth websites along with everything else that we've done. Nothing more from me, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Before questions, I'll just provide an opportunity in terms of Ernst. Now, for those that don't know Ernst, he's a senior official with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, and in my words, a key advisor to Minister Twyford. So, Ernst.
Tēnā koutou, thank you very much for the welcome this morning, and thank you. Well, I really just three quick things. One is to really acknowledge what UFTI is and represents, a little bit of how we've already used UFTI as government officials, and then maybe sort of a bit of looking ahead and what it represents going forward. I want to firstly acknowledge that UFTI builds on a proud tradition with smart growth. I remember when I worked for one of the previous ministers, Stephen Joyce, that he always held SmartGrowth up. He didn't have a lot of time for planners, but he always said SmartGrowth. That was impressive. So I just want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge also then the leadership, your willingness as leaders, iwi leaders, local government leaders, to launch this review. It hasn't been a cheap review, and it hasn't been, something lightly. And I said to Namuta earlier, I've never seen a group of senior officials and organisations so committed to a process every Wednesday afternoon for how many months? I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen such commitment to a project. Normally by now it would have been passed on to some senior advisors, some team. No, the stamina, the willingness to be agile, and the willingness to see this through right to the end, and the 7,000 edits that got sent through. It's just, I've never seen anything like it. So I really want to acknowledge that. I want to also, my colleagues here from Wakakotai NZTA, who have really on behalf of government, played such a key role. What has UFTI allowed us to do, this commitment, it has allowed us to, at very critical moments, be in the room in the beehive with colleagues from, to really reflect on what's happening here and help decisions as they come along. And so, in the first instance, UFTI has allowed us to really build understanding of the very big challenges that the Western Bay faces in terms of successful urban growth, but also the massive opportunities. So fair to say, I think that the Western Bay started a little bit behind other regions in terms of growing its networks into the Wellington and Auckland bureaucracy. And UFTI has solved that. We have really built that network. They are now, as I mentioned at the workshop the other day, there must be about 50 very influential people in Wellington who now know where Tauriko is. And I think 7 months ago that may have been 2. So I think just in terms of when these names come up, the places, it's not just where it is, what does it represent? What are some of the issues? So that richness of understanding. So UFTI has done that, and Robert, your patience to join those big briefings with Wellington colleagues has been amazing. And so that's done that. But it also allowed me to brief ministers as we went along. So unbeknownst, even sometimes to Robert, I was able to just provide monthly updates to a group of ministers from all three parties that are involved in the government. And those have been critical because we could build comfort leading up to a cabinet paper, and we're just waiting to finalise the paper based on your decision today. But so that allowed us to really, so by the time cabinet will now view this development committee in a few weeks, we've taken 7 of the key ministers through this 4 times now. And what we were able to do is reflect that this is probably the most thorough bit of land use and transport planning we've seen. It reflects all the things I mentioned earlier, but also really a team that really modelled and tested again. So it's allowed us to share that. We were quite honest. It allowed us to say that urban growth in the Bay is not for the faint-hearted. The development options in this region are few. And particularly when you look at constraints, this region is growing it is an art. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's not for business as usual. It just won't cut it. We were also able to talk about a different model of growth that UFRI represents, which is one that's focused on, broader use of transport options, including public transport, very careful understanding of limits, making more of transport by putting people where they can support public transport. So we were able to do that, and I can say probably here in public, that those UFTI briefings at the critical moments when projects like the Tauranga Northern Link came up, if it wasn't for UFTI, I fair to say, probably wouldn't have made it in. So UFTI was sort of, just the thing that was enough there at the moment, and that's where these things are valuable. The end date is important. The process and the fact that it's being done is really helpful. So we were able to really build that understanding and learn from it. So we have shamelessly borrowed UFTI and applied it in Queenstown, Wellington, Hamilton, but also recently in Auckland. We just said, hey, look at what Robert and the team have done. We want the same, please. So I just want to acknowledge the leadership that has come from Tauranga. And again, that builds on a long tradition, but UFTI has really sharpened that. So going forward, I can't think of a stronger position for the Crown to hopefully, with you have made that commitment, but if Cabinet agrees that the Crown becomes, in addition to the District Health Board in Waka Kotahi, becomes a formal member with ministers joining, just like members here. It's already been built great and future-proof, isn't it? It's settling in, and I really see the huge benefits there already. This is such a wonderful point to join because it's what it represents already. It's a living document. It will keep being in, but it's such a thorough bit of work, and it reflected both previous and this government's priorities so well, and it wasn't a radical shift. It builds on what was before, but it kept building up, and so I was part of briefing the board of, for example, Kainga Ora, which is the former Housing New Zealand, which has at the moment a limited presence in the Bay, but they were really interested in this work, and so going forward, their commitment to work with you and across government, my ministry's commitment to work on Māori housing issues, Mayor Gary, absolutely heard that, Minister Mahuta's heard that loud and clear, whether it is to help with some of the land development issues with multiple land ownership, those funding we talked about, and whether it is to work on sort of with the board of Waka Kotahi, who also had a first look, Carl, and we really liked what they saw. So for all of that work, I think it gives us a solid foundation. Our commitment as central government colleagues is to become even more involved. You've opened the door to us like you have never before. Our numbers are growing that they've never before. It used to be a pretty lonely NZTA at times with others flying in and out. We are no longer flying in and out. We now have a team that's dedicated. And they may not all live here, but they are dedicated to support you. So, and there's a lot of names of central government. We are fully committed and we understand what the tables in the back say our role is. And we have talked those through at senior level. So, well, probably enough that I'm speaking at the moment, but I want to acknowledge your role as well, so thanks for that.
Okay, thanks Ernst. Thanks for those comments and overview. Okay, I'll now open up to members of SLG in terms of comments or questions around the table. Okay, Maru.
I think through the changing of the climate and changing of the landscape, an important part of this as we go forward is the reviewing and monitoring of our planning documents. That's highly important because the landscape is going to change with this epidemic, as well as recognising the regional growth in the area properly. So transport is a big part of that part of adding value to the national growth and maximising the resources and utilities that we have in this region. And of course, this is a key part in that these reviews need to keep up with the play with that. And of course, I can't help but talk about the Māori economy that has a big, major role in all that, because of the Kaingaroa forests and the factory down Opotiki Way and all those areas and where they all come to as those developed. Some of the monitoring, actually, we have problems in the Māori communities. I call it the Māori feudalism, and how you mentor that is going to be a problem, because we need innovators and people to understand the collaboration and mixing match with things like RMAs, national policies, and where the government is at the day. The second question I wanted to talk about is the role of this David Brash in Treasury, because I think that the state-owned enterprises is going to sneak into it as we get into debt and printing money, and the banks and will have to invest in, not in properties, but in growth. So that could lead to some sort of state-owned enterprising, like how it was before. So I just want to lay those things on the table, the importance part of the shifting landscape.
Thanks, Maru. Any other comments, questions around the table? Mayor Tenby.
Thank you, Chair. Being a new entrant to this, I just wanted to echo a lot of what Ernst said, really, to just congratulate all those that have spent years on this to get to this point. It has been an extraordinary process to be a part of this short period of time since I've been involved. But Robert, I do want to say one thing in reply to your comment you made about strategies not surviving the ink drying on the page on which they're written. I learned a long time ago as a young platoon commander that we have a saying in the infantry that no plan survives HR, which is when the one-way range turns to a two-way range and the bullets are coming back at you, the plan doesn't survive. It worried me as a young 20-year-old, and it worried me hugely when I became a battalion commander, that if we're developing plans that don't survive HR, then we should do better. And those plans have got to survive HR because people's lives depend on them. I would say the same of this, and when you talk about 30, 50 and 100 years into the future, this plan has got to survive this because people's lives will depend on it. So I think, I know what you were trying to say, but I think it's really important that we understand that this is a really, to Ernst's point, a really robust plan. It's got some great thinking in it. The people around this table and many other generations before have put a lot into it, and I'm very confident that if we keep together, stick together as a team, and all that was mentioned in the wonderful words that are written through these pages, particularly the Rio, I think we will find that it will survive the test of time, and the plan will survive HR.
Well said. You put it far more eloquently than I achieved. What I was trying to say.
Okay, I've got Mayor Gary and the Chair Doug.
If there's no questions, I was going to take the opportunity to move the recommendations, but I might take questions before
Okay, I'll come back to you because I've got a suggested number 8 recommendation which I want to test before we get to that. Chair Doug.
Thank you, Chair. Look, as one of the partners involved in this project, I'm pleased to say, look, we endorse the project. Yes, there have been several iterations, but at the end of the day, there's been significant money spent on this project, and I think it behoves all of us to endorse it, recognising that there are many steps to go through in terms of this project before interventions are actually put in place and funding is committed. And in one of these dialogue or the narrative in here, you'll find that some of the stresses and strains that we face in the Western Bay here are likely to get worse before they get better. But at the end of the day, there's been assumptions made and individual projects may well change in terms of what's been forecasted given those assumptions and the passage of time. But I think it's important that we start this journey. It will take some time. It will require co-investment by a range of partners. But I also just will conclude by saying that in terms of, and the issue was covered by yourself, but in terms of oversight of the implementation of this going forward, it's going to require a high level of governance oversight in terms of monitoring the direction of travel. This is about strategy. It's not actually about getting in there and looking at each individual project, but going forward, I think there's a role for all of the partners around this table to come to the table with seeking aggressive accountability for the implementation of what we've put in front of us, together with the Crown.
Thanks, Chair. Doug. Puiraki.
Kia ora through you, Mr Chair. A nice analogy, Mayor Temby, about the planning. I just wanted to comment on the He Manukura report that was put through in terms of emphasising what, and to support what Irene in her explanation. And because I go a fair way back, quite a way back to the beginning in terms of smart growth, we as tangata whenua have always been on the back foot most of the time. There haven't been a lot of input that has gone through the formal process within smart growth. We've done a lot of talking, Maru and I and others in the past, but and I can say that it really heartens me that this report that goes in here is something that I personally, and I'm sure on behalf of all tangata whenua, we can be proud of, that it is now embedded in this strategy, in this project. And I also urge that that theme continues, and it's not just a written acknowledgement in a report in terms of tangata whenua, that it becomes part of that living document, and we continue to contribute and input very meaningful in that. So I just wanted to add those comments.
Okay.
Kia ora, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Puiraki. I've got Stuart, then Jane.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I was just reflecting on the early foundation reports of first generation of SmartGrowth from 2000-2003. And while things change, they actually stay the same in many respects. So I absolutely support the work that's been done. It's far more detailed. And as Ernst said, this is a very difficult place to manage growth in the context that we want to maintain the very reason why so many people wish to come and live here, and get the balance right between the full well-beings. It's really hard and it's very expensive. And it was good to hear that from a national perspective, Ernst, that we are leading the way. I would like to think we've often led the way, but in leading the way we've stumbled often too. And I hope that this generation of smart growth via AFTI, that we don't stumble so much. If we look back to the last probably 5 years, I think it'd be true to say we lost sight at times of where we were hopefully heading. We took things for granted, and I hope that, I'm quite confident this time that actually won't happen. I was just discussing with my colleagues yesterday that the real challenge is actually going to be implementing this, as it often is, and that is going to be take some bravery by the politicians of the time over the next decade as they change their city and district plans, right down to codes of practice, etc., to actually make this stuff work, and constantly engaging with the community as we go through that. So look, I'm quite excited about it. It's a big shift from where we were in terms of just looking for where the roads can go. This now is really around proper land use development with integrated transport modes and systems that we talk about. But it's going to be hard. Let's not delude ourselves. This is going to be a massive challenge moving forward for the whole community. And we're all concerned around housing in particular, a basic right for people to have a roof over their head, which is getting more and more challenging. But there are opportunities as well, and I'm delighted to have the Crown involved at a higher level. I think it was early on in Smart Growth around probably 2005 or 6, I think we got NZTA, or it's called Transit in the day, involved, and that was a big step change because they were isolated from Smart Growth, and now to get other Crown entities involved, I think can only bode well for the future. But thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. Thanks, Stuart. I've got Jane and then Larry.
Thank you. Well, firstly, I just want to acknowledge all of the incredible work done by the AFTI team and all of the members of the staff of the partnering organisation from Whenua. But I reflect that this is just one milestone along a very long journey that's ahead of us, and even though we've got this hopefully signed off today, we can't afford to slack. There's so much more work that's underway, and for example, I reflected yesterday about the load shift plan that's being developed in partnership between NZTA and the Regional Council, which will be an input into the Western Bay Transport System Plan. So, you know, those things all need to mesh together, and then of course we will be starting to refresh the spatial plan, and that is going to be a huge piece of work and going to need a lot of community participation. We need to bring our community with us, because a lot of what our success is predicated in is in our behaviour change of our community and making some shifts. So there's a lot of work that we need to do. But just with regard to the partnership, I think we've got a really strong partnership base, and I really appreciate the work that has been done by He Manakura to actually enrich our AFTI document, and I look forward to working much more closely and with Tangata Whenua in this forum in the future. I think it's so important that Tangata Whenua are resourced to be able to do that work. So from the Regional Council's perspective, I think we are in a position to proactively assist Tangata Whenua with some tasks. For example, GIS mapping work to help build an iwi spatial layer. We've done some work with you on that, but we would like to partner more. So well done everybody, but I think we've just got to get organised to put a lot more work in.
Thanks, Jane. I've got Larry, then John R.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to echo Jane's comments too about the work that all the staff have done, and also the work that He Manakura has put into the document. I'd specifically like to thank our TCC staff. I know they have put in many, many hours to the whole process. I support Mayor Tembe's comments and that insight into strategy, and also Robert's comments really. I think it is going to be a document which will survive, but it will need some tweaking and adjustments along the way, so that it delivers for us. But I just am so grateful for today that we do have something here that our communities want to see. It's something that has the answers for our communities going forward. And that is good. I sat here in 2013 along with Stuart and others around the table when we went through this process on the spatial, really the first major spatial plan of Smart Growth, and split into our individual councils and did the thing on the day. I don't think that was achieved in 12 months, so I do commend Robert and the team, and again, as I say, all the staff. To do this in 12 months is lightning speed if you're involved in planning. Many of us in government, local government, are frustrated with the slow pace of things, but I really appreciated Ernst's comments that, you know, it's been noticed what we've put together here, and we don't often get that window into central government of what's going on down there when we're working hard up here. And so I thank you, Ernst, for those insights. And it will be increased when ministers sit with us here. We will be able to know how we're tracking with central government. That is the real value of what we've invested in here, that we can add another partner to us, because we know the challenges we face cannot be solved by ourselves alone. We need to work together regionally, as sub-regionally, as the Mayor has pointed out, and also with central government. So it's a good day when we can sign this off and acknowledge its worthiness of this document, I think. And I thank the team for working on it and all of our partners for working together. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Larry. John?
Yeah, thank you. My first time speaking here for a while. I'd like to start with Tembi's remarks, because I think they're extraordinarily apposite, and I want to build on the remarks of Councillor Jane Nees. We've done extraordinarily well here with regard to Wellington, and the partnering with central government is critical, absolutely critical to our future success. Already someone's mentioned the word bravery, but I think we need to make sure we put the smart in smart growth. We have to take our communities with us. Too often in the past, the bullets coming back have been fired by our own communities because we've failed to engage them to a point that something like this survives the electoral cycle. We have to do what Mayor Webber has encouraged us to do and make sure the numbers go into the LTP. But we also have to make sure that we get commitment from the community so the LTP survives the 2022 local body elections. We've looked to Wellington. We thank Wellington for joining us in our endeavours to build the future of the Western Bay in a way that everyone benefits. But now I think it's important for us to look to our communities, to look to the people that we've sworn oaths to serve, and to make sure that we take them with us, because we are not leaders if our community doesn't follow. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And I'd just like to acknowledge and formally welcome you back to the Smart Growth Leadership Group after a period of time away. So thank you. Any other comments or questions before I go to Mayor Gary, who I think, Gary, you were proposing to move the recommendations.
You may wish to verbalise your number 8
okay.
before I charge up.
I will do that. And number 8 is, or words to this effect, to acknowledge the work and contribution of the IFTI project team, the project leadership team and chair, because as I noted at the workshop, the chair was Gary Ellis, and certainly from time to time Gary worked very hard in that role. Also acknowledging partner governance, staff, and including government officials, Hau Manakura, and also not forgetting stakeholders and smart growth forums in the preparation of the program business case. So I just think it's appropriate that there is that broad acknowledgement of that range of groups. So that's what I was going to suggest, Mayor Gary, in terms of additional recommendation number 8. Over to you.
I'm quite happy to move recommendations 1 with number 8 included, and in doing so, as a lot of people have mentioned, this is quite a milestone, I believe, and I think there's been a lot of criticism of smart growth in the past. We've talked about it, but we haven't done it. I think the fundamental change is the second bullet point, and I hope everybody's mindful of that, is that we endorse the work and we are absolutely committed, and we are going to take it to our long-term plans and our regional land transport plan and the national land transport plan, because that's where I think we've failed in the past. I think the other thing that's hidden in the back, and I think I know the words, and thank you, Robert, for including them, is the ongoing monitoring role. The next meeting of Smart Growth will be very different from previous meetings. We have to understand that we are a governance body here to monitor performance of the performing, or in some cases in the past non-performing TLOs and central government. So we've got that. I think Hau Manakura have come to the table, and we have got that now embedded in where we're trying to go. And I think, trying to use a bit of te reo, Hui is over, Mahi and Putia is about to begin. And for those of us that have to take our wishes to our long-term plans, there is going to be much weeping when we talk about the amount of putia required. But if we're not prepared to put the putia up, we've had a clear message from central government, then don't expect them to bail us out. So I think on that note, I'll leave it where it is. Your last point, I fully endorse the point 8. There's been a hell of a lot of work. The reason Gary's hair is not as strong as it was is that has been taking bullets from his counterparts in other organisations. But you have survived, Gary, and thank you very much on behalf of our council. And I think the 3 chief executives have shown some leadership as well. That has said, hey, we may not like what's coming out the bottom end of it, but we know that's what we have to do to get on there. So on that note, I'm quite happy to move the recommendations 1 to 8.
Thank you. It's been moved by Mayor Gary. Mayor Tenby, are you seconding?
Happy to.
Okay. Any further discussion or comments? Irene?
Yeah. Thank you all for acknowledging, and I speak as tangata whenua representative at this table, and thank you for the acknowledgement of He Manakura. I really want to actually just acknowledge that He Manakura is represented by tangata whenua. I don't want it to be about He Manakura. We're here representing tangata whenua. And I just want to reinstate that in regards to that. I just hear He Manakura coming forward, but actually it was by default. We came here, and the acknowledgement to Pakari is that around the capability and those capacities that we came. So it was by default, really, that we're here. It wasn't by divine intervention at all. But I just want to acknowledge that as a part of He Manakura, and as I mentioned, it was 3 birds that navigate through this and understanding the roles that we had to do. So in the Manakura in itself, we had the likes of Robert, Shad and Alva that was working there as tangata whenua and working in that space. But we really needed to bring a working party, a working bird, which was the Matariki team and the technical and cultural advisors, as you see, that brought the information together, but also to acknowledge the engagement of Hapu, Iwi and Māori Land Trust. And I'm also mindful in here that we're putting iwi and hapu. And the consistency is there, is that the development of land, and I'd like to think that it sits with iwi and hapu, but actually it sits with whānau land trusts. And we haven't quite actually captured that there. And I don't want us to continue that this is about He Manakura. So yeah, and I thank you for your minutes that you got in a He Manakura in there, but actually I'd like to acknowledge that it's tangata whenua that needs to be there. Thank you.
Thanks, Irene. Mayor Tenby, did you want to speak to your seconding of
I think it's all been said.
Okay.
Thanks, Bill.
I presume, Gary, nothing in reply, given you were the mover?
It's all done. It's time we moved on at the council level and endorsed what we've just agreed.
Okay.
Well, hopefully we're about to agree.
Okay, so I'll take you all to page 14. And there's the 7 recommendations there, together with the 8th recommendation that I have outlined. So it's been moved and seconded. There is no further discussion or questions, so I'll put that suite of 8 recommendations. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. So, thank you. And I think, as other speakers have said, that's quite a significant resolutions of the partners. So thanks for getting us, all partners getting to this stage. Now there's 2 other matters we need to consider. And if I can take you to paper C, which is on page 155, and this relates to the leadership group agreement. And at the meeting, when was that? At the March meeting, there was discussion around this matter, and there was the suggestion from the Regional Council in terms of alternates, and also a matter regarding voting rights, or the independent chair not having voting rights. So there was a report there from Ken. Ken, you've got anything to add to that? And
Important parts are highlighted in yellow, on page 158.
Of the joint agreement. So there are recommendations on 156. Take any questions or comments in terms of the proposed recommendations.
Happy to move, Bill.
Okay, it's been moved by John. Do I have a seconder for that? It's Stuart. Any further comments or questions on that? So we're on page 156. So I'll put that, and that covers all of the 4 recommendations there. I'll put that. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. So in due course we will welcome alternates when the dedicated representatives are unable to attend SLG meetings. And I will note that in passing that the intention is to move to quarterly meetings. We will now move to paper D, and that commences on page 166. This is from the 3 chief executives, and I think Fiona, you were going to make some brief comments in terms of this paper. Welcome.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm speaking on behalf of the 3 CEOs. There's a paper from page 166 to 170 of your agendas. In regards to the recommendations you've just passed, you would have noted that the current estimates of the cost of AFTI are $7 billion in 2020 dollars over the next 50 to 100 years. So the CEOs are proposing that work is done in terms of looking at different ways of funding and financing the work that is required. This paper also provides detail of the City Deals work that was done in Western Bay. There is a link. I know that Councillor Crosby and Ken Tremaine can speak very well about City Deals, the potential they have for New Zealand. But that piece of work was getting agreement between 3 levels of government, including 8 mayors, to really focus a part of Sydney in terms of its point of difference and how collective investment could be made in terms of aerospace and agribusiness for that part of Australia. And in doing so, creating 200,000 jobs and investing heavily in affordable housing. So I would recommend that you look at the City Deals work. What the CEOs are proposing is that there is work done by our CFOs as phase 1 to really investigate the capital needs over the next 30 years. This work is critical for our long-term plans, and so we're expecting to get that work back to you by December this year. And also to develop and evaluate options for funding and financing infrastructure. And on page 170 of your document, you'll see some of the options that are described there, such as tolling, road pricing, infrastructure bonds. And so these are the things that we want to bring back to you for you to consider at the end of this calendar year.
Thanks, Fiona. Any questions or comments in terms of the paper and the proposition that CEs have outlined? Mayor Gary.
Thank you, because this verges on my pet subject of Pūtea. Just be aware, I understand the work may be significantly academic, because there will be no cheque from heaven arriving in the next 12 months. What you're talking about here is most probably got a 3 to 5 year time frame, because you'll be looking for legislative change through the RMA, through the LGFA, through the Local Government Act, and also the international financing and reporting systems. So I just want people to be aware, this is a long-term project and there will be no pennies from heaven in the next 3 years. We are going to have to look to our own back pockets, and hopefully Big Brother in Wellington and Ernst, I'm not too sure if you've got any money with you today, but that's where the funding sources are in reality. We might put some different names around them, but it's either going to come from ratepayers or taxpayers. Or if we're lucky and collectively we go together, we might get some lotto money.
Thanks, Mayor Gary. Stuart?
Just quickly to add, we've been down this track before, but the operating environment at the moment is completely different to what it used to be and our previous attempts to look at other funding tools and mechanisms. So as Fiona outlined, there's quite a lot in the chute at the moment being developed in Wellington, and there's more on the way. So I'm quite confident that within a year or two, and it doesn't matter what the government's going to be, they'll all have to face it, that there'll be further opportunities in terms of funding levers.
Thanks, Stuart. Murray?
Yeah, I just want to go back in history in terms of that whole concept of paid and pound. Paid and pound was a political system that actually created a high-wage economy. That high-wage economy was developed through places like Forest Products, who provided social services and affordable rentals and all those type of housing, which gave a high-wage economy to that community. It also was done in Kawerau, it was done in Murupara, and that's probably the old state housing concept. And I think that there's a opportunity to have that as a renaissance, particularly on Māori land. Not only that, we own the forest now, the whole central North Island forest. It's just a matter of us having innovators to cut the timber up and putting Fletchers out of business. And that's likely to happen if you have a look at their demographics and figures that's happening now. So I'm saying there's that whole new political concept that needs to be taken into account about fed and found, which means cheaper housing. And the new innovations would be having our own sawmills to create that, and on our Māori land trust, with wasted land. We need those innovators, and these are the contributions that we should be able to play to the whole regional strategy. But I'm only saying this for the politicians representing the Parliament that's meeting here today.
Thanks, Maru. Don't appear to be any other questions or comments. I can have a mover and seconder for these recommendations, please. I've got Chair Doug, and were you seconding, Larry?
I'll let the chiefs at the top table do it.
Okay, Mayor Gary, it's been moved and seconded. No further comments. Okay, I'll put those so that we're on page 170, A to C. I'll put that. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. So that brings us to a conclusion of the Smart Growth Leadership Agenda. Thanks for your input and contribution and work and involvement in the last 12 to 14 months in terms of the UFTI work. Now, just before I close, just letting everyone know, once we've closed, there will be the individual partner council meetings. Kicking off will be Chair Doug in terms of the Bay Plenty Regional Council, then Mayor Tenby with Tauranga City, and then the final meeting will be Mayor Gary in terms of the Western Bay. They're in alphabetical order, in case anyone is interested how we chose them. Once Mayor Gary and the Western Bay have concluded their meeting, there will be a mix and mingle that's out through the doors and in the foyer at the top of the stairs. So once again, thank you, and I declare
Sorry, one more. Can we get copies of this?
I'm sure that can be arranged, Irene. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. On that note,
Mr. Chair,
Puraki.
I think it's appropriate that under our tikanga, because I opened with a karakia, I should close with one.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Otherwise, we'll be incomplete. We'll be in limbo. Yeah,
Okay,
for
so
the rest of the day.
if I can ask you to
Sure.
close.
Yep, no, that's fine. Thank you very much. And to close our meeting, a short karakia prayer. I te atua, kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whao tō tātou ariki ahu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te warua tapu, ake. Amen. Kia ora everybody. Pai marere.
So I'll ask everyone to vacate the table apart from regional council members who've got the first meeting.
Ring a wee windy.
Yeah.
So I'll declare this extraordinary meeting of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council open and ask Councillor White for an opening karakia, please.
Tēnā koe te tiamana, me koutou hokinga me o te kaunere, me koutou hokinga me mo te hapori haramai nei tēnei rā, e karakia poto mo tātou. Greetings to you all, a short blessing. E noi tātou, e honore he korore kiti atua he maunga rong ki te mato te whenua whakaro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa. Hanga e te atua, he ngā kau hau ki roto ki tēnā ki tēnā o mātou, whakatongi o tau wairua tapu hei a whina hei tōtu i a mātou e mātou whiti whakaro, whiti kōrero i runga te kaupapa nui o te rā, te kaupapa of te, ko i hukarai tō koto mātou, kai whakaora, āmene. Blessings to you all. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor White. We have apologies from Councillor Clark, Councillor MacDonald. I move they be sustained. Thank you. Councillor Winters. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. There is no public forum. There are no light items to be accepted. Are there any conflicts of interest in terms of today's agenda? Not that I'm aware of. Thank you, councillors. That moves us to item 6, which is the reports. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. There is a report in front of you with the same recommendations that were just endorsed by the SmartGrowth Leadership Group. And at that meeting, it was acknowledged this is a key milestone for the Western Bay of Plenty in the delivery of this UFTI report for your consideration. We have staff who can talk to the report, and so now really open to your questions, councillors.
Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask, of course, Bill Wosley added a 8th recommendation in there. Will we be also including that 8th recommendation or no?
If you so wish to be included, I've already written it down, so that's fine. Thank you. Oh, it's just to acknowledge staff, the UFTI staff, Regional Council staff, staff of the partner organisations, the leadership group, in terms of the work that they've done. Councillor Nees. Okay, thank you. Councillor Nees has moved the recommendation.
Oh, happy to second.
Councillor Rose, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Mr Love.
Microphone, David.
Oh, just speak into it, David.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I regret to say I've got severe doubts about where we are at the moment. I haven't got doubts about where we're going and what we want to achieve. I've just got doubts about how we're achieving it at the moment. In particular, I'm concerned about the poverty of the consultants' reports into this. We've heard about it yesterday that they based a future size of Tauranga of 400,000 on the fact that Hamilton was going to be 500,000 and therefore Tauranga sounded good for 400,000. The government as well has got its own ideas about what multimodal means, and I don't believe Wellington fully understand the geography of Tauranga or what we are really need to achieve for this vibrant city in this one-off opportunity. I feel very much like voting against this proposal or these proposals as they stand today, but I do realise that we really do need to crack on with something, and therefore I intend to abstain in the hope that all the imperfections and flaws which we have in this whole proposal as it stands at the moment are rectified as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Love. Could I just say that the document is a high-level strategy document. You're right, there are some assumptions that have been made here. Those assumptions may, with the fullness of the time, either play out or be altered, and during the course of this implementation, those will be issues that all the organisations have to deal with. But thank you for your comments. Councillor Thompson, then Councillor Von Duddleson.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I share Councillor Love's concerns. I have expressed my concerns to the council, my council colleagues and to staff, and my concerns basically are that I believe there are a plethora of matters that need more detailed consideration, and that we need to be afforded the opportunity to actually have discussions on those matters going forward. I was assured yesterday by staff that there would be opportunities for all, underline all, elected members to have the opportunity, or for those that are interested, to be able to discuss the issues going forward, particularly before the joint spatial plan is in fact gotten underway. So with that assurance that we would be able to have that opportunity to discuss and share what we see as maybe issues, I will not be voting, I will not exercise a vote against this today. I will in fact exercise my vote in favour, but my expectation is that the assurance I was given will in fact be honoured, and that we will have the opportunity to discuss the myriad of issues that I have already explained to some of you about the matters going forward and before the joint spatial plan gets much more wind under its wings. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Your support is appreciated with those qualifications. Councillor Von Duddleston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is that going?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too share these same sentiments as the last two speakers, but I will be voting in favour of this. I recognise this is a high-level document. I am really concerned that to get the implementation right, we actually have to drill in a lot deeper, and that process will take time. I'm not satisfied with some of the assumptions made, and it concerns me that this plan is a multi-billion dollar plan, like an $8 billion plan over a 30-year period, and that is going to require incredibly robust work and an understanding of our individual council responsibilities to get it right. I'm not prepared to stand in the way of progress. I think we have an opportunity with this, with central government being a partner, that's virtually unprecedented, and we have to take advantage of that. So I won't stand in the way. I will certainly support this today, but rest assured, I want to see going forward that we actually do have the ability to actually drill into some of the assumptions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Chairman. And I just want to echo what my fellow councillors have said. I also want to echo what Councillor John Robson of Tauranga City Council stated at SmartGrowth today, that with this in mind, we need to ensure that we carry our community with us throughout this process, and we don't leave them behind, because this is a very big thing, and we really need to ensure that we are, one, exercising our ability to consult, and also ensuring that we don't leave anyone behind. And we need to ensure this, as I've said, it is such a big project that we're looking towards, so we need to ensure that the community is behind us as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Councillor Thurston.
Thank you, Chairman. As one of the three honourable members for Rotorua, no one wants to see Tauranga get moving more than I do, and you can count on my vote. Tauranga will leave us in the dust, but I'll be quite happy with that analogy, I can assure you. But no, I will be supporting it, but I hope that you have minuted and taken on board Councillor Thompson's note about the need to have further discussions moving forward. But no, the Tauranga community can count on my vote as one of the three members for Rotorua. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor White.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. As a newbie on this particular council and listening to the comments of councillors who are wiser in this space than I am at the moment, I'm certainly supportive, given the cautions, and I want to support my fellow constituency member from Rotorua and to supporting the vote that's been taken for Tauranga to move on in this particular space that I understand has been around for a considerable amount of time. So it must be happy days that you've got to this point. So on that basis, I will certainly be supporting.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Brunning.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this, and I thank the fellow councillors who have been involved in this and the staff involved and other councils. I'm one of the Olbies who did this in 2004. And while we can be critical of what some of the things that have not been achieved in that time, when we really look back and we'll see what we have achieved, like the TNL, the Second Harbour Bridge, the Omokara Sewerage Pipeline, quite a lot of infrastructure has gone in over that intervening period of time. And so we've got challenges to go forward. We've got to keep faith with each respective authority and keep an eye on each other and towards catering for 400,000 people, and we were only talking about 280,000 people in 2004. So the place continues to grow and will continue to grow, and those with vision and the desire to achieve will succeed.
Thank you, Councillor Brunning. And on that note, I see no other councillors want to make comments. Can I just refer you to the resolution? So we're doing 1 to 8. 8 is an acknowledgement of staff across the whole spectrum of activity. It's been moved by Councillor Nees, seconded by Councillor Rose. I intend to put it. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
Mr Chairman, I'd like to abstain and like it's been noted.
Your abstention's noted.
In my third term on council, this is the first time I've abstained on anything.
Thank you, Councillor Love. Okay, councillors, there is no light items, so in closing, could I ask Councillor White to give us a closing karakia?
With pleasure, Mr Chair. That was very quick. Kei noi tātou. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou riki a Ukraiti, me te arohoti atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake. Amen. May the blessings be upon you all as you move forward on this particular kaupapa. Kia ora. Kia ora. Kia ora.
Greetings again, everybody. Welcome to Tauranga City Councillors who are present and with us. I'll just seek apologies. I've got apologies so far from Councillors Hollis, Kitty and Granger, and I don't think there's any more that I can see. Is it your wish that we accept those apologies? Thank you. Seconded. Kelvin, thank you very much. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. We have a very short agenda item today, but declaration of conflicts of interest. I don't believe there are any in addition to what we would normally have. Thank you. Which leads us to item 10.1, recommendations A, and we will also include G, which is the thanks to staff, which I think everybody has seen, those that were here. Just a general thanks to staff, including the UFTI executive. Marty, do you want to
Thank you, Worship.
discuss?
I'm going to take this opportunity to hand over to Christine, actually, and give her the privilege of speaking to this, given the fact that this started some 2 years ago with a gap analysis led by Christine and a wider team. So, Christine.
Thank you. So yes, just over 2 years ago, the SmartGrowth team of the day did a stock-taking gap analysis, which identified that through the whole transport network there were a number of opportunities, challenges, and unless there was something done about it, it was going to continue to deteriorate, and we didn't have a really clear integrated plan about what we were going to do as a sub-region. So that was a really good piece of collaborative work. We were probably brutally honest with each other about what we saw as the challenges and what needed to happen. And as part of that, the mayors, the chairs and the CEO of the day sought an audience with the chair of NZTA and talked about the problems, and through that process there was an agreement to a joint commitment to work together to create a plan to move forward, and from that was effectively the start of UFTI. Not long afterwards, TCC started doing quite a lot more work around the housing supply shortfall, working together with developers and our own research. We identified that there's a significant shortfall in land supply projected over the next 3, 5 and 10 year period, and we subsequently sought advice from NZIER, and they concluded that that shortage of housing supply was going to directly impact on the housing market and push house prices up somewhere around about $60,000 a year for people trying to buy homes in the Tauranga area. So that really was defining for us that we did have a real transport issue and we did have a real housing supply issue, and we needed to move forward at some pace. So I think the benefit of UFTI, it has delivered us a clear plan to go forward. It's got some clear principles, directions, and paints a future picture of our city that we now need to move forward into delivery. So for TCC, we have, knowing that work's going on in the background, have been continuing to progress a number of initiatives, and they have been confirmed as needed by UFTI, and UFTI has also shaped how they are developed and what outcomes they deliver for our community. Probably the ones of note are the Housing Choice Plan change and the Te Papa Spatial Plan, which has a strong multimodal element. Continuing to progress the Te Tumu and Tauriko West work, again strong multimodal parts of that. The Cameron Road multimodal study. And late last year, this council approved $2 million to progress the Western Bay Plenty Transport System Plan, which will become the key delivery tool for the next stage of implementation of UFTI. So I think it provides us a clear pathway forward, but we do need to make sure that we continue to focus on delivery to provide the value and benefit back to our communities.
Thank you very much, Christine. Councillors, questions of Marty or Christine? Councillor Bordoff.
Sorry, I was just indicating I have to move. Do you allow me the privilege of questions?
Thank you. Questions? Anyone? Nothing at all? Thank you, Councillor Bordoff. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Robson, thank you very much.
Yeah, just speaking to it a little bit. I think it is a great day, as I said earlier in the SmartGrowth meeting. When I returned to SmartGrowth in 2016, I made my first speech there about the transport network that hadn't been completed since 2004. Won't take more credit for that than is due, but because everyone has worked very hard on this. Our ring road is now perhaps a little closer to being completed, and the other important things we have. Our community needs transport and it needs housing. Those are the two major things that we need as a city. And this document is, as has been said earlier, going to help us in that. It's a program business case. That's why some of the wording is the way it is. It speaks to the government also, which is a different language, believe me. When you go there, you have to learn to talk differently. It's like going into an African village and learning another language sometimes. But it also will speak to our community that we have got a plan now, a strategy for moving our city forward. We live in one of the greatest cities in the world, in my opinion, and it's been a privilege to have a small part to play in this, and I endorse it to my colleagues that we'll go forward, and we will do what we need to do financially to support it as we get to our long-term plan, which is the important thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bullock. Councillor Robson.
Yeah, I'd just like to reflect quickly on a couple of words.
No, they're on. They're on.
Yeah, I'd just like to reflect quickly on a couple of words used by Christine Jones, and that's the honesty of the review. I don't think it was brutally honest. I just think it was plain and simple, truthful and honest. And I think as leaders in this sub-region, I think it behoves us to be prepared to listen to people, and rather than see brutality in what they reflect to us, just see honesty and good intent. There's no brutality in honesty. We need it. It's the foundation by which we can move forward. And we mustn't judge it in a pejorative way. We mustn't be threatened by it. I think that's really important. That's one point I'd really like to make. And the second point I'd like to make is that the point, again, I made in the Smart Growth Leadership Group meeting is it's now for us, if we're truly leaders, to take our community with us in the same way that I'm sure Mayor Gary and the Western Bay Plenty District Council team will commit to take their community with them. We now have 364 days to get the commitment of our community to see this through. And I think that's, at least in part, where a significant amount of our energy and focus should be. Because without taking the community with us to the LTP, it may not survive 2022. And that, to me, is the benchmark. To me, the measure of success of what we're doing here today and what we've committed to do going forward is what the election in 2022 is about and what the community decides. That will be, for me, the key metric that will determine whether all our intent has come to something or, as in the past, not as much as we'd hoped.
Thank you. Councillors, any other? Councillor Arbery.
Kia ora koutou, e hoa mā. So just quickly, I think it's quite clear that our city has a number of challenges. I think the strategy is a high-level good start in terms of trying to address that. And the next step I'm looking forward to in terms of the TSB and how we practically make change. So very happy to endorse this, and I think it's a very positive step.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. I think the key number in this whole report is 400,000. That is the potential population of the Western Bay, Plenty, Tauranga, Moana. And so I think we have to plan with that number in mind. And it may not be 50 or may not even be 100 years down the track, but it's going to be, it will get to us and we'll get to that point at some stage in the future. So I think this document and this initiative with central government at the table is going to be fundamental to see us achieving that. Certainly Tauranga and the Western Bay will be a powerhouse of our New Zealand Inc. And so I think what we're doing here today is a real strong foundation towards that goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Kia ora, yeah, I'd like to endorse this document as well, but I think also it comes down to not forgetting the people. We've got a lot of growth going on, but not forgetting the people's needs that are currently here and the full well-beings that are just so important around their health and the environment, culture and the economics of the people that live here. So I think I'd just like to endorse the engagement on a very local level and from the ground up with our communities all the way through this is the most important. They've got the knowledge is here in the room in our communities of how to bring this into being. So yeah, that's what I'd like to say.
Kia ora, thank you. Deputy Mayor Salisbury, you look poised in your seat.
I just want to endorse what the others have said and thank staff and all who've been involved in getting it to this place. And I'm impressed it's a really robust document and creates a great framework, and I'm encouraged also to hear that there's room for it to develop as we grow and move forward, and look forward to bringing our community with us.
Tremendous. And just very briefly from the Chair, I just wanted to endorse Marty's comments and that of Christine's. I won't repeat what I said earlier on in the main forum, but just thanks for all the work for those that have contributed so much over the years, and particularly I think during the work, Christine, that you and your team did, and Marty and the executive generally across the lockdown period of COVID, when you were asked to produce some significant documents at really short notice. So, which has all fed into this as well, ultimately. We have an opportunity, folks. We know that. We've heard it all before, and I think the opportunity for us to work together as a council strategically to support the work that's gone on well prior to us with the Western Bay Plenty District Council, with the Bay Plenty Regional Council, in cooperation with central government, is right here in our hands. And it would be a great shame to see it slip away in any regard. So I will then put the motion to you. This is A to G inclusive. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Abstentions? And carried. Thank you very much, Council. I declare the meeting closed.
Council meeting C20.9. We have got a short agenda. We have some apologies. Councillor Marsh and Lynch. A mover for that, please. Henry and Scribner. I'll put that all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, no carried. Any conflicts of interest? There are none. Thank you very much. We now move on to the substantive part of we're here for today. It's on page 6 of our agenda. I just remind you all, this is a high-level strategy. The implementation is up to the independent partners, so I don't think we need to be too concerned, other than we do have to take this through to our long-term plan, and that's a commitment. Once you all say yes, and I'm sure you will, we will take forward. It's all explanatory. We've had a workshop on this. The recommendation on page 6. Are there any questions of staff at all? There is no. Can I have a mover and a second, please? Councillor Thwaites, Councillor Dean. Before I put that, does anybody want to speak for or against the motion? Thank you. We want to be home today, though. Thank you, Councillor. So, Councillor Murray-Benge.
I think in favour of all the people who have spoken before in the previous meetings, I think it behoves us to also express an opinion. And I think I look back, and I think at 2000, at the beginning of the century, we had Norm Brunning and we had Philip Martelli, key people from our council who were involved heavily in making sure that smart growth worked. And then we found that as time went by, the ball was dropped. Philip Martelli will tell you by 2015 it was meant to be 4-laned to Mokoroa, and somewhere between government and local, the ball got dropped. So, Mr. Chairman, my real concern is that as we move into these tough economic times, and nobody's doubting that they are going to be difficult, it really behoves us to make sure that our politicians understand exactly and we keep them on target. Before we were here, we didn't actually know the background well enough to drive it hard, but it behoves us to make sure that we hold our politicians and central government to account. And every time they fiddle with the NZTA and shift the money around, it's our job to make sure we keep them on target. Just as you are doing, Mr. Mayor, I think you have led us in this last couple of years, and we've just got to keep going. So I support the recommendations, and may we just keep going and make sure we find the funds and make this place affordable for the people who want to live here. That's another challenge that we face with land supply. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Webber. Okay, I would endorse this AFTI programme. I think it's an impressive piece of work, and I support where it's going. However, I would like some comfort that endorsing this AFTI report and using it to guide transport, investment, and housing and so on will not preclude or have any negative effect on this council's ability to promote the funding or to promote the building or funding of other transport infrastructure locally. I think you know where I'm coming from on that one.
Yes, I'll support this, but the similar lines as can we expand? We can expand this, can we? Further on, because what I'm thinking is what it lacks is we have not got a decent road out of this area. Here we are with the major port in the country, and we still have got to go over, trucks have to go over that huge big hill. You don't want to know about the bypass to Katikati, but some of us still say there should be a tunnel through the hills in Thompson's Track or somewhere there to get in a decent road to get out of this area with all the big trucks. We got 1,000 trucks a day at least go through Katikati. They don't want to go over that hill. And I just think that in this report, it's lacking in saying how we have a better road to get out of this area. Other than that, I'll agree.
Councillor Dean.
I support this and I seconded the motion. However, I do have some concerns about the continuing process of taking up more and more land out of Western Bay. I think that we need to have a very strong PR campaign to convince the public of the need for this whole program and get them to come along with us in this process. And I think that sort of investment would be part of the whole deal. So basically, I am in support of it, and I think it's a good thing going forward.
Any other speakers for or against the motion? Grant Daly and then Councillor Thwaites.
Yes, I'd like to commend Smart Growth Leadership Group for having the initiative to reset the Smart Growth agenda and get back on to the original track, which was set in 2005. And I believe that you've ended up in the right place, and the partner councils for committing the funds to go down this AFTI track. I think we've ended up in the right place, and I'd like to echo Councillor Robson's 364 days to make sure that the public are on board with this initiative and that it doesn't become an election issue at the next local government elections. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank our Deputy CEO, Gary Ellis, for the significant amount of work that he's put into this project. I know we've got some very smart people put this thing together, and I think you know we've arrived at the right place. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Is it going? Yep.
I too would like to speak in support of this. I think it's a great development from the initial smart growth planning. There were talk of a centre of excellence or some opportunity to move it forward, and from that grew the whole UFTI. I became aware of what UFTI stood for, and that's great. I'd like to acknowledge Robert and his team for putting together this document. Ben and Janine sitting over there, immense work. Certainly acknowledge the role of tangata whenua in this document. I think that's a key development, and they are key. Cooperation and partnership is just absolutely key for this whole district. So with that, I would like to acknowledge Mayor Webber. I don't have to suck up to Mayor Webber because we're probably both getting to the end of our political careers, but he certainly drove this through, and you've heard him speak earlier in the meeting about the pūtea, about the need to do this. I know he was frustrated in his initial term as mayor, and he stepped aside from the regional transport plan and the passenger transport, but he's now back on board and he's driving it with a passion. So in partnership with Chairman Doug and Mayor Tenby at Tauranga, I acknowledge, Gary, your commitment to this. You've been unrelenting, and congratulations, and I think a lot of the credit to this goes to you. But looking forward, I really look forward to the partnership with Ernst and the team from Wellington, because that is the other key part of this. And absolutely, our partnership with Wellington is vital, and I would certainly hope to see the three leaders on that plane, if Air New Zealand does fly out of Tauranga again, back regularly going to Wellington and reporting in. So well done to everyone involved in this. Oh, thank you.
Don, any other speakers? Councillor Henry? No. It seems as if everybody wants to speak today. But,
Good opportunity to have a chance to speak for him here. I have to say, as a first-time councillor on Western Bay, I'm very happy to be in on this point. I think that congratulations to all that have carried it this far. I don't know whether I would have been quite as comfortable working through all the issues that you had to work through. So congratulations to all staff and elected members who worked through that. Also congratulations to the collaborative approach that Western Bay, Tauranga City and the Regional Council have had in working together. I think that's quite an achievement and a lot of foresight, and it's not easy to work that way, and I think it's got us to this point because of that. And the initiatives that came out of that smart growth and UFTI, and we heard your glorious praise for the UFTI document, and I think that you know what I've seen about it is well praise its well due. So where is he? He's over back there. Over there. Well done. And I take this meeting. I don't know, one of the councillors from Tauranga City. I think that our elected members now are in the phase where we are to carry this through, and we are to keep our public on side. I think that's a really valid point coming into the national elections now, and who knows who's going to be sitting around the table, and at the next local body election. So we need to be keeping that up with that engagement process, and keeping our ratepayers on board with us, and keeping us on the journey, walking alongside them on the journey through this. And I think also that's in saying that, I think that if we do this right and we do it quick and we move it through speedily, I think it could be an exemplar for the rest of the country to follow local government, national government, local, regional and national government working collaboratively on projects that are only going to better the communities in which they are benefiting from those projects that they work together on. So I guess fully support.
Councillor Granger, did you want to say? I hate you to miss out, but Deputy Mayor.
Yes, well, there's really not much more to say. I think this is a very thorough, competent and professional report, and I just wanted to comment on one point that's become very obvious to me, and I'm very supportive of, that's become clear through the construction of this report, and that is that public transport is never successful unless there is sufficient population density. And this report has made that very clear, and there's a lot of work ahead of us on a lot of fronts, but I look forward to seeing the actions put in place to see that that happens. And so, yes, I'm very happy to support this program.
Thank you. Given there's no further speakers, I'd take this opportunity to thank Gary and Miriam and Rachel and Philip for the work you put on behalf. Also the UFTI team. Robert, your patience is something I don't understand. I don't know how you do it, but and Ernst, your connection into Wellington has been incredibly helpful, and we thank you for that. But on that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? No. I declare that carried and close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance, and to the bystanders, sorry it took us so long.